Hi, this is Jeffrey Scott. We have a special edition of the podcast. It's myself and Mitch Katz. We're going to take you through our myriad techniques for coaching high performing individuals and teams on how to unlock their true potential, how to go from good to great, and really how to take great people and unleash and unlock them. And so we'll talk about individuals and teams. This was a long recording, so we have divided it in half. This is part one, and so we're going to dive right in. Here we go. Okay, there we go. We made it. Live stream 2025, Unlocking Team Potential, Coaching Strategies for Peak Performance. In this event today, Mitch Katz and myself will explore what it takes to coach your team for impact, to build accountability, to foster a culture of growth. We're going to do this by sharing our secret sauce, how we work with teams and individuals, and the tools that we use to elevate teams to really reach their full potential. My name's Jeffrey Scott, founder of Jeffrey Scott Consulting, and with us today is Mitch Katz, who's our Director of Operations. Mitch, please introduce yourself.
Mitch Katz, Director of Operations, also do executive coaching and facilitating and coaching of peer groups. And this coaching topic is one of my favorite things to talk about. I love talking about how we can coach up and unlock potential. So let's dive right in. Jeffrey, it's all about unlocking potential, right? So how do you define unlocking potential for teams and individuals?
Right. Good question. It's kind of a throwaway word until you give it some meaning. To me, unlocking potential is all about creating awareness and then creating actions. So awareness first, actions second, in order to unlock potential. For teams, it's about having goals and knowing where you are and understanding that gap. And that gap is the potential that you want to unlock. And so a lot of it depends on the goals, right? You've got the low goals or the wrong goals, you're not really unlocking the correct potential there. It's also about company habits and rhythms and getting the team to work, getting the team to work in a very accountable rhythm. And it's also about teamwork itself, right? Has the team gelled, and are the sum of the pieces more productive and more powerful than each individual part? For individuals, unlocking potential means having a vision for them that they may not see themselves. Mitch, you and I do that when we work with owners, and we help not all clients, but many owners see their potential in a way that they just never, look that far up and out in terms of what they could achieve. And then it's also about finding roles where the owner or where employees, where leaders can flourish. You can't unlock potential if someone's a mechanic and they should be an account manager, just as an example, right? And so it has a lot to do with putting them into the sweet spot. So those are a few definitions for unlocking potential. Let me ask you a question, Mitch. Turn the tables here.
Let's do it.
What's the difference between managing and coaching? Let's get some of these definitions out of the way.
Yeah, sure. And I love this question. When we talk about unlocking potential, coaching, where we need that coaching to unlock potential. Managing is more directive, right? Managing is telling people what to do, whereas coaching is helping somebody get better at something that they want to do, right? And it's helping them, it's asking questions to unlock what's already inside of them, right? And so psychologically, people want to be doing things that they have autonomy over, right? That they've set, that they've controlled. So we're going to get better results when we unlock this out of somebody, what's inside of somebody, by asking questions, as opposed to telling them what to do, right? When it's their idea, they're more likely to execute. And so that's really, the main differentiation between management and coaching. And I think there's uses for both of them for sure, right? Management, we're going to use when the stakes are higher, when there's a higher level of urgency. We have to, in those situations, sometimes we we have to be telling people what to do. But when we have the ability to coach somebody through what they think they could be doing, and ask them questions about, what do you think the outcome could be? What outcome are you looking to have? And how do you get to where you want to be in your mind, and talking through those things, that's when you really unlock that potential. So big difference. And
Okay.
yeah, and we talk about the distinction too. We've talked about the distinction between consulting and coaching too, but reality is that coaching is a key component of consulting, right? We
Mhm.
can't just, I can't walk through somebody's shop and just write up a report of everything I see there that I would change and hand it to them without the coaching component. Because if I don't ask those questions, what have you done before? What are you looking to solve? How have you thought about this before? That report could be near useless, right? So we have to make sure that we do that coaching component. And
Gotcha.
so, yeah, and that's how we make sure we're solving the real problems. And so, you know, as we go down this journey of coaching, Jeffrey, let's talk about how you adapt your coaching philosophy for high performing teams versus struggling teams.
Yeah. So I just want to summarize because we just said a lot. So we talked about managing versus coaching, which I think is really important. And then in our world, we talked about coaching versus consulting. And so I like that. Um, managing is a little more prescriptive when you're the boss, and consulting, when you're us, is also a little more prescriptive. Here's what we think you should do. But coaching is very similar, whether you're a boss to an employee or whether you're us working with one of our clients. So I think that's interesting. And so your question to me is, how do I adapt my coaching philosophy for high performing teams versus struggling teams? I'll give you just some quick answers to that. With struggling teams, we focus on stability, right? What's going on here with this team? Let's get the roles clear. Let's get communication rhythms and systems worked out. Let's work on basic trust between the teams. And I think we'll dive into that 5 different ways throughout this hour. So this is more of sort of a setup, but you're doing a lot of remedial work. Whereas with high performing teams, it's all about getting to the edge. All right, we have a high performing team. It's like a race car. The car is all tuned up, ready to go. How do we take it to the edge? And so that's about pushing boundaries about what's achievable. It's about challenging assumptions that the high performing team is using. Just because they're high performing doesn't mean that they're performing on the edge, right? So challenging those assumptions, helping them stretch towards new goals. A high performing team generally doesn't need motivation, but they need to understand the possible stretch and the whys and hows of that stretch. And they'll figure out, the detailed hows generally, but showing them what's possible and explaining why, and helping them get off go. That's what I would be doing with a high performing team versus uh, a struggling team. Anything you want to add to that, Mitch?
I think to kind of say what you said in a little bit different way to think about it is that high performing teams might be high performing because they aren't being challenged enough, right? They aren't reaching far enough. And so we're talking about unlocking potential, right? They're high performing because they're in this zone of comfort,
Mm,
but if they get stretched, they can really reach even higher. And so that's where we unlock that potential with them.
that is smart. In other words, a team that's performing at 70% might actually be out achieving a team performing at 100%,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
All right. What's your next question for me?
Yeah. So what core principles guide your approach to coaching to peak performance?
I'm going to give you 5 quick answers to that. First off, you need buy-in. Corporate principle that we use and that you need to use as a leader or owner is you've got to get buy-in. Now, we need buy-in from the owner, and then we need buy-in from anybody else on that team. And we need we need both of those. If you are an owner and you're working with your team, you just need buy-in with the team. We get that buy-in through 360 input. We get everyone's opinion. We know everyone's view on the good, the bad, the ugly, on their own job, on the company, on the owner, right? On what's working, what's not. And we integrate that into the coaching sessions. That creates buy-in. You involve somebody, you honor all their opinions, you're taking a big step towards buy-in. We also get agreement on objectives, right? What are we aiming to do here? So getting that agreement up front, making sure there's an alignment of values with people on the team. You're not going to have peak performance if you have people on the team that don't buy in, they don't agree with your basic values of your company or how you do business. And when we work with a client, we figure that out if someone's a values misfit. And if you're doing this yourself, you can't coach somebody who, I'm just going to use a silly example. If they tend to steal, you're not going to coach them to be honest, right? Now, integrity could be a value, but pick any value. It's hard to coach people to come into your value set. They generally bring those values with them. And so the last thing we do, core principle now for coaching peak performance, is we use honesty and accountability. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm not going to beat around the bush. I might be savvy in how I bring the information across, but you're going to know what I'm thinking. And there will be accountability when we're all done in terms of what happens between the coaching sessions. So you've got to have all those elements I just spoke about, Mitch, to coach for peak performance.
Sure. And you're talking about doing a lot of discovery, right? We need to find out what's going on by doing these certain things. And so that's all part of unlocking that potential, right? That we talked about. And so obviously you need to be able to assess the team's current level of performance and what their potential is. So, a little bit of a similar question, but how do you go about that, assessing a team's current level of performance and potential?
Here's how I go about it. Here's how I know you go about it. Obviously, the confidential surveys, right? So talking to each member of the team confidentially on all the elements I had just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, where they can speak totally freely and openly. So that's number one. I also assess through observation, get the team together and see how the team interacts. A huge amount is learned through observation. And then thirdly, structured discussions, whether it's on finances or on organization or on strategy or on growth plans or, you name it. The key elements that we're going to address in a planning session are these structured discussions really help me assess who's in, who's not in, who's strong, who's weak. So those three elements, I would say, are the pillars for assessing. I mean, we also use personality profiles. Yes, those help. And so I'll throw those in as a fourth, but the first three I think are most important. Now, one of the best indicators, Mitch, is how people and a team, but how people respond to a challenge. You don't know what you got until you've seen them challenged. I was talking with Christian Ruff about how he puts together teams for special ops, special forces. He told me the funniest thing. People show up and they look great. They look great on paper. They interview great. They look like they're doing a job well day to day. But when the poop hits the fan and you're fighting a war, he says, when you're under real challenge, that's when you know what you got. And so the same thing when we're working with the team and we create tension and these challenges. And then we find out, do people shut down or do they lean in? Do they point fingers or do they come with solutions? And so working through these challenges tells me a lot and helps in that assessment.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add to that, in those consulting roadmap sessions, right? You're talking about that. That's where we get the opportunity to really challenge people in the teams. And, you start to see where people become defensive or they're holding on to things because of the way they've done things, and you get to see who's open, right? And obviously that's where you want to see a growth mindset, right? Because the people that are going to tend to have the higher performance and have the most potential are going to have that growth mindset, that open mindset to hearing what you have to say and say, okay, maybe that will work. But the people that say that'll never work, we've done that, that won't work because of this, right? That's where we see that come about.
Yeah. So what are so you're saying lack of growth mindset is a barrier to
Oh
peak
yeah.
performance. What are other barriers you've seen? And you want to define growth mindset? We throw that word around too, but it has a real definition.
Yeah. I think growth mindset is really about being open to what's possible, right? Fixed mindset is, I know what works. I know, I am who I am. I can't change. Nobody else is going to change. That's a fixed mindset.
Yeah.
Growth mindset is where you're open to new possibilities and what's possible, and you're open to hearing other people's ideas and trying to execute on them. So
Yeah.
you asked about other common barriers that hold teams or individuals back from peak performance, and I think that people tend to reach that peak performance when they're aligned on what matters, right? I'm talking about teams in particular right now, but when the team is aligned on what matters, uh, and they believe they can improve and have an impact on that thing that matters, and they have some level of autonomy over how things that get done, that's what allows the environment for peak performance. And so if any of those things, any of those conditions don't exist, that's a barrier to achieving peak performance as a team. And sometimes you might be missing some of those things, and you might experience some peak performance at times, but it won't necessarily be sustainable. So to achieve sustainable peak performance, we really need to have those three conditions. Again, alignment on what matters, people believing that they can improve and have an impact on that, and some level of autonomy over how things get done. Another barrier could be a lack of vision, right, or clarity over our mission. That ties back to what matters, right? Do we all believe in the mission? And
Yeah.
so that goes to hiring. Are we hiring the right people that align with our mission? And if we're
Can
not,
I jump in there?
sure.
So Christian Ruff, again, Special Forces, their mission is really clear, right? Well, when they're going on I don't even know what you call it, but an excursion. But in business, it's not always clear what the company's mission is or the team's mission. Sure, we go to work. Sure, we punch our time card. Yes, maybe we build or maintain beautiful landscapes, but having a stronger mission, I think, is really important. I just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of teams struggle with that. And I'm actually thinking about Dan Pink, the author. He writes a lot on motivation and drive, right? He talks about purpose, which is essentially mission, as
Yeah.
you can look at it with a capital P or a lowercase p, right? And the capital P is, the higher purpose, something greater than myself. And the lowercase p, still as important, is why does this matter for somebody, right? Or who does this matter for? So our clients, right? If we're beautifying property and we're creating outdoor spaces where people can enjoy, either their family, create memories with their family, or have a space for peace, right? That's when you can tie that to something that actually matters for somebody. So I think that's really important for teams to think about and talk about together, because it is one of the bigger struggles I've seen in companies.
Any other barriers you want to mention? You might have had one or two more.
Yeah, another one is if there's a lack of trust and communication within the team, that's a huge barrier. If people don't feel safe expressing ideas that they have, they're not going to do that, right? They're not going to tell somebody how they really feel or what they really think, and that's going to just hold them and the team back. And if people aren't getting feedback, everything just stays in the blind spot, and so nobody can improve. So there has to be a culture of trust, communication, and feedback. Feedback is super important.
Okay.
And I'll say the last barrier is really limiting beliefs, right? Where people just feel like they have this belief that they either can't, they can't delegate anything because they don't have anybody to delegate, or no one else can do it the way I do it, or my clients just want to see me because I'm the owner, right? All these kind of limiting beliefs that we have to challenge in coaching really are kind of, again, what unlock that potential, because staying stuck with those limiting beliefs is going to be a barrier.
It's interesting about limiting beliefs. As you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, can those be coached out or not? Now, growth, if you don't have a growth mindset, that's hard to coach in. But I think we've had plenty of success where teams have shown up to work with us and they've had limiting beliefs and we've changed those. But they don't happen easily. They don't happen overnight. It takes conviction and data and other things, but it is possible if the person wants to grow, has a growth mindset, and they have ambition, basically. They want to change and grow. It is possible to take people beyond their limiting beliefs.
There's a giant force preventing that from happening. It's called the human brain, right? There's a ton of fun psychology behind that. There's one thing called the endowment effect, right? Where people hold on to things just because it's theirs for no other reason, but just because it's theirs, right? So, if somebody, if an idea was like somebody's baby, right? Or this process or a service, right? Oh, we do this service and we have to do this service. I created this service and our clients love this service, but it really could actually be holding the team back, and they hold on to it just because they created it. And so it's really about getting them to see that, the pain of holding on to something is going to be greater than letting go of it. So I think that's super important to understand. I think that's how we can really get beyond those limiting beliefs, is help people see that.
Yeah.
So I have another question for you.
Okay.
And so, we're talking about high performers and, getting peak performers on the team. So how do you evaluate whether a team is ready to integrate a high performer successfully? And how do you ensure adding a high performer doesn't disrupt existing team dynamics?
Yeah. It's a real issue. And it's a great question. Thanks, Mitch. It's a real issue. And I get asked this question a lot with my coaching clients when I'm telling them you really need to bring on a COO, a sales manager, somebody that we're going to stick into the organization. They're not going to have come up through the organization. And when the team is very tight, the owners can be like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't know. I can only fear bad things happening. A lot of hesitation, and rightly so, because I've seen high performers come in that have messed up culture. And really, in hindsight, we should have either integrated them differently or they never should have brought on. So to answer your question, is there a clear role for the high performer? Like, it's super clear. You don't want to just bring someone in because, God, what a great hire, I can't pass them up. The team wants to know what their role is going to be, and they want to know. And then you need to know how that's going to impact other people's roles. So in some positions, it's obvious. Sales manager, super obvious, right? But there's other positions where you have to really bring that clarity. And then, are they a values and culture fit? I've been working with one client, first initial I, that's all I'll say. And he brought on a sales manager that just wasn't a values and culture fit. And we thought that could be helpful, could really give us what we needed. And it did bring on a lot, but in the end, it was not a good fit. They were not a culture fit. And it ended up causing more chaos than it did good. So this is very important. You can bring someone to stretch and change your culture but not really your values, right? They shouldn't be changing your values. They can impact the culture or raising the level, the bar of how we compete and perform. But still, you can't sacrifice values to get there. And so, number 3, you need to get buy-in from the team. We're bringing this person in. Let them interview the person. Let them be part of the process. There's really I don't ever see a problem with that. If there is, then you have a deeper problem with your team. And then onboarding, what happens the first 30, 60, 90 days, absolutely critical. It's like an organ transplant. Now I'm sorry, it's a sad metaphor there because that you need to take pills forever. But think about it where let's just use that metaphor and just assume that it grows in over time. But the beginning is the most important part. So that whole onboarding process very critical to making sure the high performer doesn't disrupt and engages correctly. And then I'll add one more. The team should have a really clear strategic plan in place. We know what objectives we're going after. Everybody's got their key results they're responsible for. When this person comes in, they're not coming into a sort of a whiteboard that's blank, but they're coming in where there's some clarity on how they fit into the team and what they need to be achieving for the team. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'll add to that ensuring that a high performer doesn't disrupt existing team dynamics is, I think, one of the biggest mistakes I've seen people make there is where they expect results too fast from this high performer, especially in a leadership role. They want to see these results. And if they tie it to compensation, it's even worse, or bonus.
Yeah.
Because then those people are incentivized to make things happen, and they skip the process where they build rapport with the team and find out what's really going on. And that's just a recipe for disaster.
It's funny you say that. Not funny, but it's coincidental because I'm coaching someone else, begins with the letter A, and he's onboarding somebody today. Today's that person's first day.
Congratulations.
And he's like, well, exactly. and he was saying, well, I want them to do a SWOT on my team within 10 days and give me feedback. I'm like, 10 days is awfully darn quick to get a SWOT of any depth. And so that's just an example of, I'm paying a lot. We're bringing this person in. We want to start seeing results. And so that's maybe a small example, but it's an example where you really don't want to skip that upfront phase of the person integrating and learning about your company. And then to the point you said about money, I totally agree. Too many people will put money towards achieving milestones and rocks, as opposed to just making the incentive tied towards the actual bigger financial result we want. So I'm a believer that you can set goals, but the pot of money should pay for the incentive.
Yeah, for sure. And achieving those goals should drive results, right? The goals can be different, right? So just like you talked about your client, the first 10 days he wanted the SWOT analysis, I would change that, right? Instead of first 10 days I want a SWOT analysis in my team, how about first 10 days you have coffee with 30 of the people on the team? How about in the first 10 days you find out what those people like to do in their spare time outside of work, right? Get to know the people. That's the goal, right? When you start up, not a SWOT analysis or driving results or seeing where costs can get cut. Get to know the people.
That's great. I'm going to write that down and tell them. 10 days, I want you to tell me personally about all your people that we've met, but not on the business side. That'll come second. That's a great idea, Mitch. All right. Now, smarty pants here. We're going to turn the tables on you. I have a question for you. How do you balance individual goals with team goals?
I think we balance individual goals with team goals by going back to that alignment, right? If you bring on people on your team that are not aligned with what you're looking to achieve, their goals are going to be over here, very different from what your goals are as a team. And it's very hard to achieve both at the same time. And so I think that you need to have alignment. And then once you have alignment with, bringing people on that are in favor or passionate about the same thing you are, value the same things you do, you make sure that the right people in the right seats, right? The people genuinely are a good fit for the role that they're doing. And then once you have that, your team goals and your individual goals will feed each other, right? So as individual goals are achieved, it's also achieving the team goals, and vice versa. As the team goals are being achieved, the individual goals are being lifted up. And I'll give an example of this too. When we talk about right people in the right seats, I'll tell you about a client that I worked with. The team came into a roadmap session. Their CFO, I would not call their CFO an underperformer because she was doing a lot and she's a high performer, but she was struggling in the CFO role. And through this process, we just realized that was not the seat for her. It was actually over dinner. I realized she had much more stronger operations background than she did over in finance. I said, wait a second. This is not working because you are struggling and overwhelmed in this role. But if we put you in operations role, you will thrive. And then let's get let's get somebody who's going to thrive in the controller role or the CFO role. And then all of a sudden people are in the right seats. And now that team went from struggling and butting heads a lot and combativeness to now constructive conflict and really raising up. And it's really exciting to see that kind of alignment.
That's pretty radical. That kind of change you made in that, or that you recognized. That would take a person to recognize that on their own team, a real growth mindset. Set aside all the existing structure and decisions, right? Is there a better opportunity here?
And the best part, she was so open to it. As soon as I said it, I actually thought she was going to throw something at me when I said it, but I could actually see the weight falling off of her shoulders as I said it, and total buy-in, and just amazing things from that team since then.
It's you remind me of when I had dinner with Greg Wildeboer and his wife. Greg runs a great company in Canada, and he brought his gardening, kind of a subdivision in his company, gardening subdivision of maintenance, and he brought her along as well for some reason. So she was like third strongest person. Over dinner, I gave her a promotion. I didn't even ask his opinion. I said, "Oh my gosh, you are so good. You should be in charge of all maintenance, and the sky's the limit." She became the general manager of the whole company pretty quickly, and is just a rock star. So sometimes it just takes an outsider to see that potential that's hard for the owner to see sometimes.
I have another question for you, but before I do, I'll also share, those two examples where we uncovered these pretty radical things over dinner should just bring us back to that client that you're talking about with that 10-day goal, the SWOT analysis, right? Imagine what you'll uncover over coffee or lunch with the team when you get to know people and really understand what they're passionate about and what they care about. And then you'll start to see they might not be in the right seats. That's more powerful and more impactful than like doing the SWOT analysis from this higher level.
Yeah.
So my next question for you is, what's the first steps that you recommend when beginning to coach a new team or its owner?
Okay. So some of this will be repeat, but which is fine. But number one, get input, get confidential input. And even from the owner, I want to know how the owner self-assesses himself or herself. I want to understand if his or her self-assessments match everyone else's assessments of him or her. And I'll even talk to the spouse. Even if the spouse is not involved in the company, the spouse lives with all the fruit, the good fruit and the rotten fruit, if you know what I'm saying. And so doing those confidential surveys, very important. And then I want to get clarity on direction. Okay, what's your vision for the company, owner, and what are the main objectives you want to achieve when we start working together? So there's two ways to answer objective, Mitch. Here's what I personally want you to help me do. And then here's my objectives for my company that you're going to help me achieve. And that might be a subtle difference, but I like to know both, right? So why does the owner want our help? But what are the objectives for the team? Because the whole team needs to understand that, the objectives for the company. And then I also want to get clarity on priorities. And so it's important to know objectives, but there's priorities, and you want to know how the company and the owner are thinking about priorities. Often they're going to be wrong, or they're going to be missing something. And often it's with priorities is where we have a big impact, and where, anyone coaching anyone in any company. So you in the audience, when you're coaching your team or a division manager, having them, you have agreement on vision and objectives and what are their priorities. That's where you're likely going to have a big impact on helping them think those through. So the fourth thing is I like to look at decisions that are working and not working when I begin coaching a new team. What are decisions they've made? What decisions are they thinking? What decisions are they about to make? Because some are great, some are awesome, and some just are misaligned, and that's where the team or the owner needs a lot of help. So I like to look at the decision-making process, levels of decision. How much did they just shoot from the hip, bang, 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 versus thoughtful and through a process? How much did they get buy-in from the team versus they're just running ramshot over the team? There's a lot of different ways to look at that, but it says a lot. And then lastly, I like to do a keep, stop, start for the owner. Now, it doesn't really matter what team you put in front of me. If they're working with the owner, it's all going to be impacted by what the owner does day to day. The team's success is greatly impacted by the owner, positively, negatively, neutrally. And so no matter what we're doing to help a team, I need to assess the owner and what they really need to keep, stop, and start doing. Because getting that in alignment, that figured out, is going to cascade positively to the whole team to let the team find their most productive roles, right? Getting everything in alignment. And so that's the fifth thing, but very important to really get off to the races, so to speak, with coaching a team.
That's so true. An owner or somebody at a higher level, that has power, the way they operate, the way they behave, it's so important, because if it's not in alignment with what they say their values are, nobody's going to follow that. We just had this discussion on a peer group call yesterday. One of the members in the group, his brother is his partner in business, and he's also he has a role, within the business as a project manager. And the group was talking about this some lack of clarity or some chaos, right, that's going on in the production department. And the group is throwing out idea after idea after idea, which were all great ideas. But I said, ultimately, this is going to come down to what your brother is willing and able to do, right? You can tell all these guys to do everything you want them to do, but if an owner, your brother, is not willing or able to do those things, then nobody else next to him or under him is going to do any of those things either. So super important to have that type of alignment. The other thing, a little bit of a repeat too, but something that's really powerful I found is that personality or that behavior assessment that we like to do at the beginning, right? We really find out where people stand in terms of ambition and leadership and these things. And you mentioned the spouse knowing all the ins and outs, right? And I always tell people regarding that behavior assessment, so just be prepared when you go home and you tell your spouse about the results from this assessment. They're going to say, I know, I've been telling you that for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So therefore is listen to your spouse, because they know all that stuff that you're going to find out anyways.
I want to say something about personality profiles. We use one that has a lot of data. I won't give the name away, but it gives a lot of data, and it's kind of overwhelming, to be honest. I'm going to admit it. And some new personality profiles have come out where it's super simple. You can do it quick, and there you go. It spits out things easy. But since the advent of AI, what I've learned is that our super complicated, sometimes overwhelming personality assessments provide so much data and ammunition that you can use with AI to figure out what's really going on and give much clearer directions and help to that person. So with AI, it sort of turned everything on its head. By the way, I just read something as a example of this. It used to be that when you would look for a job and you'd have to have a 1-page resume or 2-page. But now with AI doing the screening, a 10-page resume might give more ammunition to AI to choose you. So it's kind of along that example with assessments.
We've talked a lot about assessments, Jeffrey, and what you just said actually made me think of this concept. There's a reason, the longer, more in-depth one, it's harder to digest, and it's overwhelming because of the same reason that most people don't like seeing themselves on camera or looking in the mirror for too long, right? If you have a longer report, it's like staring at yourself in the mirror, and that can be uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, but the longer you do it, the more information you have, the more powerful it is, because the more power you have over what you can change, right? It's all about the inner work in that situation.
Yeah.
So next question, Jeffrey, for you. When we work with teams, right, or when you're working with teams or individuals, what are some of your favorite coaching frameworks or models to use?
Well, there's a lot, and some are simple, some are complex, and this is not exhaustive at all, but I'm just going to give you some that come to mind. One that we just started using is the Johari window, Johari. I'll let you look it up. It'll take 15 minutes to go into it. And so those listening can look it up, but it was very effective for bonding and creating trust. We used it in our own consulting retreat, and it really helped. Yeah, it really was great. So it's a exercise you can use. You could do it yourself. You don't even need a leader necessarily, but it can be used to create some bonding and personal understanding of each other. So I like that. Number 2, I like the GROW model, which you've been introducing into our peer groups, which is really just a way to help people with goal setting. Again, GROW. You can Google it if you want to look it up. Anything you want to say about that, Mitch, since that was your model?
No, same as Johari window. We could talk about that for 15, 20 minutes, so I won't get into the details, but I love it. So that's why I've been bringing it around to our groups and our clients. Yeah,
we use it in our peer group meetings. Just a great tool to help somebody figure out goal setting. You can look it up and understand that more. The keep, stop, start. It is so simple. It's almost stupid, but sometimes simple's really powerful. And so I use it different ways. I gather information using keep, stop, start. I will have a team discuss it in person. Hey, what should the owner keep, stop, start? And then something I've done in the past year is when we're all done with a leadership team meeting, at the very end, when trust has been built, strategies have been built, and we want to leave on an impactful note, I'll have everybody go around the room and share what they think everyone else should keep, stop, start doing. One thing. And I know keep, stop, start is 3 questions, but it'll be like, what should they do more of and do less of? Let me even simplify that. And so saying it out loud once trust is built, very powerful. Let's see, that's number 4. Number 5, and what else? I think I got that from you. And what else? And what else? You just ask again, and what else? In some ways, it can help you avoid the meeting after the meeting, which is a symptom of a very sick, unhealthy team or team leader not doing a good job. And what else? And what else? So if you have the time to get that and what else, you're going to get the thing the person was saving for the meeting after the meeting to tell somebody else. And they will bring it up in the meeting. My 6th coaching framework is the Eisenhower matrix: urgent versus important. Easy to understand, harder to implement. I think it takes time to actually put it into use. But this I will explain real quick, right? What's urgent and important? We got to do that right now. We're doing that today. What's urgent but not as important? It feels like we have to do it today, but do we or don't we? What's important but not urgent? We can do that tomorrow. But if you keep pushing it off, you'll never hit your bigger goals. And then what's not urgent and not important? And why the heck are you even doing that today? Let's delegate it or just drop it. And so using that Eisenhower matrix, and it takes time. It's like working out. You takes a lot of habit to figure how to implement that one on a day-to-day basis. But those are some frameworks right there. Did I miss any? Do you have a favorite that I didn't mention?
Well, I'll just add to that Eisenhower matrix. Sometimes people have a hard time determining what is urgent, what is important. How do we know? Now, obviously, that goes back to alignment and our goals and our values and all those things too. But another way to look at it is on a matrix very similar to the Eisenhower matrix would be looking at it by impact and effort, right? So if something's going to have a high impact and low effort, let's just do it right now, get it done, right? If something's going to have a low impact and a high effort, why are we even talking about it? Don't do it, right? So you can map things out. And we talk about that. I've started talking about that with peer group hosts. Peer group hosts get a ton of information, a ton of feedback from the group about everything that they can do for their business. And they go through notes and notes of pages on how to, on what they're going to do. And so I said, well, map it out. Take all these ideas, put it on sticky notes, go on a whiteboard, make this matrix, and with your team, put these things on the whiteboard and see where they land in terms of effort and impact. And then you have your priority list, right? And then you can work on it. The other thing I'll add is,
oh yeah, I have one more too.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, the other thing I was going to add to, and what else? So were you going to add on to that Eisenhower matrix or something else?
Either. No, keep going.
And what else is super powerful, because this goes back to how you unlock team potential and what I said earlier about when something is somebody's own idea, when they own the idea, they're more likely to execute on it. So, and what else allows you to ask somebody when they come to you with a challenge, and you can say, well, what do you think you should do? Or what can you do? And they might say something and you might not like that thing that they said, or it might not be what you would recommend. Instead of jumping to, giving direction, now you're managing. Instead of jumping to that, you can say, and what else? Oh, I guess I got to think about something else. And then they think about something else. And then you can ask it. It feels uncomfortable the first few times you do it, but you'll get to this point more often than not where they come up with something that is, very close to how you would do it. And then you get to say, that's a great idea, Jeffrey. Go ahead and do that. And let me know how that goes. Can we talk about, let's talk about it tomorrow afternoon, and you can let me know how it goes. Now you have ownership, you have execution, and you have accountability. That's why I love that question.
I like that a lot. So that's if they come with one option, and it's the classic bring me 3 solutions to a problem, right? But basically this just happens through conversation, and you're adding that. I like that a lot. I realized I never gave the 6th framework, and it is 5 times why. This is a Japanese method. Why? Why is that? Why did that happen? Why did that happen? Now, you don't literally ask 5 times why, although you can, but you mentally in your head and through conversation ask what the underlying reason for something is. And then when you hear that, you dig a little further. Is there an underlying reason why that happened? Is there an underlying reason why that happened? And that gets you to the root cause. So you could call that a root cause analysis. That's a fancy term for 5 times why. I find this in my coaching and consulting extremely helpful. When somebody brings you a problem and you're like, oh, I'm going to be helpful and help them solve that problem, you're not necessarily helping them get to the underlying issue that they need to solve. So when you're any coach listening, any leader, any owner can use this root cause analysis. Again, that sounds wonky. So just the 5 times why, very, very, very effective.
I'll give a real life example of that with one of the peer groups. One of the members brought a topic to the group. Hey, does anybody do drip marketing campaigns? I want to start it. Well, why do you want to start that? Well, because I need more sales. Why do you need more sales? Well, because we're not closing as much leads. Why are we not closing as many leads? Well, actually, we're not getting the leads to go forward to our consulting process. Well, why not? Well, because we actually haven't trained or made sure that our people that are answering the phones understand how to qualify leads. So we're missing opportunities there. Okay, now we've gone 5 or 6 levels deep, and now we understand, okay, maybe you do need a drip campaign, and that's one thing you can do. But don't we want to solve the issue of undertrained staff answering our phones? So that's a
Bingo.
yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
bingo. Bingo, bingo.